Oh, it's been way too long, but there she is, Lizz Winstead, one of my
You've
favorites.
been avoiding me. You
Nope.
never return my calls.
Nope.
I call you. I outside your door. I peed on the lawn of your terrible neighbor. Yet nothing. Nothing.
Oh, that was you. If I had known that was you, I reached out to you when you made your triumphant return to the Daily Show. I'm sure a billion people did. I was the last. I checked the email to correspond. You have the red carpet, the open archway to you, my queen, your highness, Lizz Winstead. It's very good to see you back here. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to blab with you.
Yeah, it's always so easy to talk with you. And I love to talk with you about anything. I love just having you in my space. I love watching you do stuff and things. And you've been doing a lot of stuff and things and a lot of really important work. But I do want to ask you, I got to ask you, what was it like to be back on the Daily Show after all of the drama, all of the disrespect over the years? You made your triumphant return with your friend Sarah Silverman. I was just so happy. I hope you are like have closure and feel happy about how that went.
Oh, it was great. Thanks to Sarah. 20 years later, I went back on the show and it was really cool. It was really nice to be in that. I mean, I wasn't even in that studio. Like, that's a new studio. So it was fun. It was great to also just sort of come full circle on, knowing that using humor to expose hypocrisy is a game that I'm pretty good at. And in that format, we really made it work. And so to be able to take all of that knowledge and skill and then focus it and combine it in abortion activism is pretty cool. And then to be able to tell the story of how I did it and how people can follow me now and what I'm doing was really fun. But you got to cram a bunch of shit in 5 minutes.
You did a great job. You did a great job. Was it the platform you were expecting? Did you get a lot of attention after that appearance? It's a young demographic, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, we raised a shit ton of money. We got a bunch of really young signups. And I was surprised. I felt kind of bad because I was like, oh my God, Sarah, like I'm your first guest when you're guest hosting. Like, you could have anybody. And I was humbled and excited that the audience was thrilled, acted like they were thrilled that I was there. They stood up, they were clapping, it was fun. But the thing that I found the most interesting was I heard from most people afterwards. And so when we look at the trajectory of how the Daily Show has evolved and how people consume the Daily Show, it was so much watched you in the morning, watched a clip, saw your clip. So it wasn't like a shit ton of people watching instantly or so that were responding to me.
That's always I always try to make that point when people say that, a CNN or anybody's ratings are lower or whatever. I'm like, those ratings are only based on who's watching at the time, when most people don't watch away. The vast majority of people probably even watch on clips, much less on delay or something, which I'm not sure they measure. So that's great. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
It was really fun. It was nice to just see. There was there's some old guard folks still there. It was great, and Sarah was great. And then we ended up going out on tour together for like 5 dates after that. And she really had enough of me in the whole month.
What were those audiences like?
Incredibly smart and fun. It was really great. And so and then we also got to have a table. Abortion Access Front had like information and all kinds of shit. So her audiences are really smart.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're doing these big venues with Sarah, and out front, you're also recruiting new people to support the cause.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I never stop. Come on.
No, I was thinking about that right before we hit record. I was thinking about my life versus your life. I was like, I wonder, what her work is like and her life is like and her balance is like, but she's been basically doing activism for a long time, over 10 years. How long? I mean, would you say that you've been doing this kind of activism? Basically, I'll call it women's reproductive rights, much less abortion access, if we want to get more specific.
I mean, I would say I've been doing activism since the early 1990s. The sort of laser focus, because, I launched Air America Radio. I was doing all kinds of shit, in sort of generalized fuck the man kind of politics. And then, slowly it dawned on me how little I was talking about the thing that is the most important to me, and how little, let's be clear, progressive spaces wanted to hear about it even, right? It's a wedge issue. Do men want to hear about it? It's like, I hear about men shit all the time. I would hope so. It's about human rights, right? And so I think the reason that I slid so hard into it, and like you said, since about 2011 is when I really shift that into that dynamic of reproductive rights, was when no one else was doing it. And, when Wendy Davis stood on the floor of the Texas State House in those sneakers and filibustered for 13 hours, and it wasn't on the news, it was streaming on Twitter, which is where I watched it. Some small Texas activist was watching it and said, this is on, and I found it. And then I started live tweeting it. And that was the power of Twitter, right? You would live tweet an event that the media was ignoring. You could help get it trending. And then the corporate media started watching the trends.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they started carrying it, right? And so that's the power of, the internet, and how you can use social media to help prioritize corporate media, help prioritize people. But the thing is, and the thing that always bugged me was, I would blab on and on and on and drop the facts and do all the shit and be some kind of anger fluffer. And I didn't have anybody. And then people were like, well, what do I do? And I was like, donate. That's not interesting. Tell donate, whatever. So then I was like, I want to have a component when people ask that question that I can answer it. Right. So that's why I started the org, to be able to say, here's hilarious ways we're dragging these people for filth. We're dropping some facts. We're, just like bringing people out of the shadows and into the light, and then hopefully into the gutter. And then it's like, okay, I did that. Now what? It's like, now what? Here's a list of things. So that's the part that's, I think, the most fun, is having a complete package.
And you've brought in so many, and such a diverse group of young women, feminists, and people who know their shit, legal people, activists, black and white, everything else, and done it's such a really interesting organization. I also love the podcast. Really good. You have real smart, funny people. Feminist Buzzkills Live. You'll love that podcast. Go subscribe to it. Go listen to it. I've been listening to it lately because I wanted to talk to Liz, and I wanted to know what I was talking about. And it's really good. And you're doing live dates in New York on June 7th.
Yep.
And then you're going to be down in Atlanta, where I know there's a lot of folks that listen to this show on, was it July 20th, I think?
Yeah, July 20th at Terminal West in Atlanta. It's like, the pod is great because, first of all, we're the only pod about reproductive rights that's done by people who are on the ground.
Yeah.
So our guests are the doctors, the activists, patients, researchers. When you watch sometimes cable news, you'll see people who are talking about the horse race, or you'll see like legal analysis. And we have some of that too. But really, when you hear from the people who are providing the care and the people who are funding poor folks just trying to get there, it really helps you understand what the landscape really means. We get to do a podcast that follows the trends of what it means for all these fucking laws that are saying, yeah, we have a health of the mother exceptions, but you have to be dying in front of us for us to actually do the abortion. And the stories of people who have literally stood in the parking lot of a hospital waiting to hemorrhage because they've been excused because they haven't started hemorrhaging yet. Like, that's not a joke, and so to be able to hear those, to bring those stories, and then to bring the outrage. And then we also love to have comics on to bring a little light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes comedians have the best takes on what's going on in current events. But you'll get a lot of info because the media can't cover it all. So we decided to.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying about when the Supreme Court makes a decision, it's kind of abstract for most people. I mean, it doesn't directly affect a lot of people. Many of these big decisions, whether it be on gay marriage or even Obamacare, much less women's reproductive rights. And so you don't really see the effect that the decisions have. But what you're doing with the podcast and what you've always been doing with your work is showing, as you called it, a landscape of people, from the physicians and the actual patients to anywhere in between, everybody else, and how this is actually playing out, which is what I want to ask you. Since Roe v. Wade got struck down, we have seen so many state houses pass new laws. You've been covering this from the beginning and before. What do you want to tell everybody? Like, how do you take me through what you have seen? I know you could talk for probably 2 hours because there's been so many changes in so many states, but what are some of those stories that you've been telling, that you've heard, that you're seeing now as a result of these just punitive, medieval, horrible laws being upheld?
Well, I think the thing that we saw instantly is the second that a lot of these really hostile states were planning way ahead.
Yeah.
And, people who didn't pay attention didn't understand that a lot of states had these draconian laws on the books, like we saw in Wisconsin, and a law from 1858 is literally has shut down all of the clinics. And the people of Wisconsin, just elected a state Supreme Court justice. And I think they're going to finally overturn that. Yeah. Michigan, that's happening all over the place. So when Roe v. Wade was overturned, 13 states ended abortion immediately. They had something called a trigger law on the books, which said if Roe v. Wade is closed, we close our doors. What that did in one day was put 35 million women of reproductive age living in a state where there is no access to abortion. And that was jarring in and of itself, right? Because people were unprepared, because no one was really talking about it in a way that it needed to be talked about. People told us we were hysterical when we said they're going to overturn Roe. And so what we have seen is a steady stream of desperation trying to get the care they need. People traveling 30%, just to give you an example, I live part of the year in Minnesota and part of the year in New York. 30% of all the abortions performed in the state of Minnesota are people from Texas every year.
Wow.
30%. So people are traveling. That's how far it takes for you to get an appointment, because there's backups in the states that are still offering it. We've gone into these draconian, if it's not totally banned, there's a 6-week ban. And for those of you that maybe need a little lesson on how pregnancy works, a 6-week ban is really a 2-week ban, because you have to miss your period once to figure out that maybe you're pregnant, and that's 4 weeks. And then you have 2 weeks to decide. And
I don't think they took that into consideration when they
never. They don't take anything into consideration, I think, Pete.
I don't think they were thinking about women I don't think they were thinking about women.
I don't either. And I think
know any or care about them very much also, maybe.
Well, it's also too, anytime that you're giving a fetus rights, you're taking away rights from the person who's pregnant. Like, that's just true. So you're stripping that away, right? But also, I don't think they really thought about too, if they really cared about ending abortion, which they obviously don't, they care about control. They would be much more interested in making sure that they have a reality check on people like sex. Turns out they like to have sex. And so making it any kind of pregnancy prevention available and education available would take the amount of abortions out of the equation. We're always going to need abortion. I want to be really clear on that. I also want to be really clear that adoption isn't the alternative to abortion, because no one owes you anything from their body. Adoption is the alternative to parenting, and abortion is the alternative to giving birth. So, that's kind of just a little bit of a reframe.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting way of saying it. Yeah.
And so we're hearing a lot of people who are having abortions now later in pregnancy because it's taking them so long to find a place, which costs them more, it's just grave risk. People don't think about how cruel it is to put somebody through the rigors of staying pregnant if you have a pregnancy that's incompatible with life. Doctors are terrified to perform life-saving abortions because the laws are so muddy. And to quote Adam Serwer, you know, the cruelty is the point.
Yeah.
The confusion is the point. The chilling effect is the point. There's physicians who are fleeing states. There's med schools who are seeing enrollment plummet. There's students who are leaving. There's whole OBGYN departments in Idaho and other states that have just shut down in hospitals because they can't do their jobs. And that's what we're facing. We're facing a crisis of caring about whether or not people will live or die, and making people continue horrifying pregnancies, making people continue pregnancies at all. And I just want to be super clear too, as Republicans are seeing, you know, the fruits of their labor rotting and the public viewing it as rotting fruit, as they present this consensus, and I'm quoting all over the place if you're listening, 12 weeks seems to be a place where I feel comfortable landing. Why? What does that mean? Because if you are a person who thinks that there is some point that you get to decide what someone else does with their body, then that you are no longer saying that that person's human. If you actually think, whether it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks, so I don't give a fuck what week, people need abortions throughout the course of their pregnancies for the reason that they and their doctor, or they and whomever have decided. And for someone else to decide there's a arbitrary blanket time that government intervention is okay between your skin and the rest of yourself, that's not cool. That's chattel. That's creating chattel culture for people who can be pregnant. And that should terrify everyone.
Well, it doesn't terrify everyone. That's for damn sure, unfortunately. Yeah. What do you say to the women who are part of the anti-abortion movement? And there sure is a lot of them in powerful positions, including, I think, Senator Josh Hawley's wife.
Oh, Amy Hawley. She was the attorney.
Erin.
Erin Hawley. Yeah. What did I say? Amy? Yeah.
Doesn't matter, but yeah, her name is Erin.
Yeah, good old Erin Hawley. She will rush to any lawsuit that will oppress women. You know, what I say is, if you want to understand how intoxicating and how deep white supremacy goes, these people are benefiting from a system and have chosen to, instead of buck the system, have decided to take comfort in it. And it's really horrifying. It's about the most horrifying. And so to have Erin Hawley, Josh Hawley's wife, she's already made one horrible life decision, letting that man soil her. You'd think she'd be the first one to be like, birth control, abortion all day, because I'm fucking Josh Hawley. But no. For her to be the lawyer in this medication abortion case that we've all been hearing about, and I listened to the oral arguments that she presented, it was profoundly disappointing for her to literally, and this is wild, so I'm sure your listeners have been seeing the basics of this case, but a group of anti-abortion medical providers and a dentist and a pro-life dentist filed a case in Texas under a judge that they knew hated abortion, literally spent his whole life as an anti-abortion attorney, you know, was like in the firm that protected the 50-yard line coach who wanted to pray, like that kind of shit. Every baker who hates gay people, I think they represent every baker. Like they're just that gang. Then he gets picked by Trump, plopped into Amarillo, Texas, decides this case, which they were bringing the case saying that the FDA rushed to judgment. They rushed to the market the abortion pill. I'm going to give you a quiz, Pete. So the abortion pill was 1988 in Europe, put on the market. 12 years later, came to the United States, was on the market in the United States. We did 4 years of study from 2000 till now. About 5.2 million people have used the abortion pill. Pete, how many cases do you think, like 5.2 million, how many cases do you think ended in death from using the abortion pill?
Well, I bet you have millions of abortions.
Fair.
But that's not. And they think that that's death of the baby, right? They're going to say that. That's what they're going to
go with them. Let's go with what how many people do you think?
How many women died using that pill?
Yeah. In 5.2 million, how many do you think they use? Because this is
I don't know the answer. I just know it's far fewer than so many other drugs like Viagra and Advil that are on the market. That I do know, but I don't know. 10, 5, 10,
25.
People. How many?
25.
25 people died?
25 people, and they say complications associated with, so it's not even this definitive line.
Right.
So in 5.2 million people, 25 people wound up dead in some fashion because of the abortion. There is no drug on the market that gives you that kind of odds. And just to give you an idea of, 88 goes on the market in Europe, 4-year study here goes on the market here, right? Viagra from patent to market, 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so these lawyers are arguing that they're going to experience profound harm because this drug was rushed to the market. And because the FDA expanded dispensing of the pill through the mail, that is going to cause a wave of patients, for some unknown reason, are all of a sudden going to be experiencing terrible side effects from taking the abortion pill. And then here's the part that you have to be a nut to believe. This wave of horrible side effects are going to happen. And then those who have experienced the side effects are going to seek out the anti-abortion doctor who would like to put them in jail for taking the pill. So this is what they've claimed. And the dentist. And I'm like, honey, ain't nobody going to an anti-abortion dentist if they are having abortion pill complications. I know you work in cavities. I think you're a little mistaken.
Well, what is the current legal state? The Fifth Circuit fears that Supreme Court.
The Fifth Circuit heard the case in their arguments, and this was really great. And this needs to be put out to the world. So the plaintiffs bringing this forth had to prove 3 things to the Fifth Circuit. 1, that they would be overwhelmingly harmed because abortion pills are being mailed. No, that I've just told you no. B, they've said that they have had to treat people who've taken the abortion pill and had to provide abortions, but they had to prove that somebody didn't allow them to enact their conscience clause and that they were forced to do it. Never proved it, never even claimed that was the case. And lastly, the 3 cases that they cited in their argument were all pills that were procured from India. So none of those pills even went through the FDA.
Wow.
Yes. And that's the stuff that, like, if you listen to my podcast, you can actually go. We did a special episode with a reproductive attorney just on laying out the case. And the judges were clearly on the side of Josh Hawley's wife. And it was really depressing. I mean, Matthew Ho, one of the judges hearing this case, was on record saying that abortion is a moral failing of America. It's a mess. So it's sitting now. The Fifth Circuit is going to mull it over, and they're going to decide whether or not these people have standing and if they should force medication abortion to go back through more rigorous testing And also right now, the FDA has said you can take it up to 10 weeks. When it came onto the market, it was 7 weeks. So they might roll it back to 7 weeks, which again, who knows they're pregnant. They may force it to go back to in-person dispensing of a pill, which you don't need that. And a whole lot of other monstrous shit, and then go through a whole bunch of process again. So they could rule that. Either way, when the Fifth Circuit throws its ruling down, it's going to the Supreme Court. Just know that to be a true thing. And then this fantastic Supreme Court will decide. Now, the interesting thing in all of this is where I have hope.
Oh, good.
The makers of mifepristone is the drug we've been talking about. It's the generic name for Mifeprex, which is the pill that RU486. So the manufacturer of mifepristone, their attorney spoke, right? And laid a very compelling case that if they stop this drug, they will go out of business, right? And so there's nothing the Supreme Court loves more than making sure a corporation stays open. So I don't know that even this Supreme Court would put a company out of business based on a bunch of bullshit. But who knows? I can't say, because these are not good times or normal times or times where people look at the Constitution. So it's a mess.
And they're not stopping at. I feel
like I'm filibustering.
They're not. No, they're fine. They're not stopping at abortion access or the pills. I mean, they've come for sex education, as you mentioned earlier. They're coming for IVF. They're making it as hard as possible for you to prevent. I was talking about this with somebody recently. We're not even talking about terminating a pregnancy. Now we're also talking about preventing conception, condoms, IVF. I mean, where does it end? The answer I know is it doesn't, because the anti-abortion activists are pretty open. But what is, do you think, the strategy as we see right now with the anti-abortion activists as to what's next? I mean, they've got the whole Southeast, it would seem.
Well, I think the what's next is a total ban on abortion. A federal ban on abortion.
That'll be the issue in this election, right? Like, for the Republican is going to have to, whoever the nominee is, most likely Trump, but they're going to have to say where they would stand on a national ban.
Yes. And also, I think people need to understand a trend that is now bubbling up, which is, since they've seen the abject failure of abortion bans, people actually like abortion polls better than every politician.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what they're doing now is they're marrying anti-trans bills that involve kids and abortion bans so that they can get people to vote on the abortion ban. And so the combo platter, it's the same hate. I mean, the hatred is very intersectional. We need to be better at being intersectional, because, man, these haters, they are all the same fucking people. And the clinics that they're closing are also the same clinics that are providing low-income trans care as well, right? And so it's a double whammy. And that's a big trend that we're going to be seeing. I also think that birth control, I mean, there was leaked audio in Tennessee talking about IVF and saying, you know what, don't mention IVF, but let's slide this shit in. How do we frame it around that, right? So it's a worldview of reproduction that is based in Christian extremism. And it is terrifying to see how much control they have when they are the minority. This just shows you what gerrymandering does. And also, we need an education plan too, because as we saw, like, it was really exciting, right? Remember last year when we watched Kansas, the state of Kansas overwhelmingly vote for codifying abortion in their state. By the same token, Republicans who had proposed and or passed these bills were voted back in. So people aren't even making the connection as to who are the people creating these laws, and we need to get rid of them, as well as making sure that abortion access is going to be available in the states that we live in.
I feel like what I've seen, I pay pretty close attention to all these different progressive organizations that try to help progressives, especially women, get elected, that not only are people waking up in terms of how they're going to vote and becoming active in the political process, a lot of people are running on this issue as motivated by this issue. Are you seeing a lot of young people who are running for office at any different level because of women's reproductive rights being so under threat?
I am. And what I am seeing too, and this is a really big piece of how politicians, but also how us can affect things. People used to run away from abortion. Progressives, Democrats, right? People need to not only run on this issue, but they have to run to say, I'm going to expand access to abortion. It's not enough to beat shit back. It's you have to expand it, and we all need to talk about it and normalize it and recenter abortion, birth control, IVF, trans care, all of it, recenter it into the healthcare conversation about healthcare somebody might need in their lifetime. You know, if the statistic is 1 in 4 women will have an abortion during her reproductive life, that is a lot of people who are finding themselves pregnant with valid reasons to not want to be pregnant anymore, right?
Yeah.
And we need to honor that, and we need to talk about it without shame.
Yeah.
We need to not always center the cases that are incredibly heartbreaking and tragic. Nobody wants to hear about an 11-year-old who can't get an abortion in Ohio and has to travel to Indiana. That's fucking awful. But you know what else is awful? Any other person who is assessing their life, their mental health, the way that they are, who simply can't have another kid, is not capable of having children, honoring that in the same way is where we need to get. And
yeah, no, it's such a good point. You have talked about abortion using language that helps reframe it and helps take away the stigma, and I think alleviate the shame that so many people have talking about it, much less having one. You wrote about your own and your amazing book. I probably mention it every time you're here. Liz Free or Die, isn't that the name of the book?
it is.
And I think it's a really good point on the abortion issue, and the same on like the gun issue. We don't need to look just at the mass shooting and at the most horrific of crimes. We don't need to just look at the most horrific circumstances. We need to realize that the damage that this is doing in so many other ways, short of death, short of permanent damage, it is really problematic, to be nice, and if not terribly inconvenient and life altering, you know, in so many different ways. And for what? And for what? That's the thing. Like, if we're going to create new laws that might be problematic or life altering, they should be because they're doing something for the greater good. So the question is here is, you're causing so much pain and damage, and for what? And we need to focus on those stories as well as the big headlines that we hear about, you know, a child being raped. Of course, we should agree on that. I think that's what you're saying.
100%. And I think, Pete, in so many of these issues, guns, abortion, we've run away from our moral ground of how we feel about it because we're trying to appease a false other side, right? That's never happening. And and especially when it comes to abortion, the other side can win every time. If you don't say the word, how do you defend it? And the other side can say, you won't say abortion. You'll say pro-choice. You'll say women's reproductive rights. You'll say all this stuff. Like, you won't even say it. So why should anybody be listening to you? Because you have shame about it.
Right.
Why are you ashamed? And so part of the big thing that we do at Abortion Access Front is to really just start that conversation and sort of challenge folks to say, we've been talking this way for a long time. Yeah. Did we ever stop to think about why we're saying that, or why we decided though to say those things, or say no one's for abortion? I'm super for abortion. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it wasn't our morals that dictated it to us.
Right.
It was us trying to win at a respectability game that ain't happening. And quite frankly, Pete, I'm sick of bringing a PowerPoint presentation to a knife fight. I just won't do it anymore, because we're in a knife fight.
They are in the mainstream of the Republican Party in Congress. They're asking witnesses, expert witnesses, including doctors who have performed abortions, who have been dealing with women's reproductive rights their whole career. Where do you stand on murdering a baby that was just born? Like, that's where they're at. So we need to greet them and meet them at a more honest place, because that's not a thing, and it's a horrible thing to ask. And yet that's their window now. That's the Overton window has changed to, you're killing live babies. And we're like, I feel like we'll always be kind of reacting. And I think to some extent that's okay, because we don't think that they're going to say or believe or do these crazy things. So we don't have time to prepare against them all the time. But in this case, it's like, what are you supposed to say to that?
I'll tell you what you say to that. Here's what you say to that. What you say to that is, the cruelty with which you would reframe palliative care for people who have seconds, minutes, hours with a child that they had, that they knew was not going to exist. For you to reframe that into something else is one of the cruelest things I've ever heard. And you, I hope, never have to experience that, because that is one of the hardest things that any parent will do. And fuck you, because that is what they're talking about. And also, Tim Scott, just declared he's running for president. Last year, his hot take was that the Democrats were supporting abortion up to 52 weeks of pregnancy.
Oh, is that a giraffe? I think the station.
Last I Googled, that is.
I believe he's referring, in his defense, I believe he was referring to giraffes.
Could be, which, those giraffes are just like abortion-loving, long-legged whores.
Giraffes are
whores.
I knew we would get into the whoring of giraffes, and I'm glad that we're
slutty verse of the in the animal kingdom. Like, you spread the legs, you're taking out 17 lions. I don't know what happens, but it's a spam.
Liz, I'll let you go, but I want to talk to you about everything else in life and politics in the world, and not only the issue that you're the best at, women's reproductive rights. So let's do that soon and continue.
Yeah, I'll talk about any. You know me, I can talk about anything.
And way too long, and you're so good at it. Abortion Access Front, everybody, all the links. Go see her and the gang in New York for a live taping.
Come to our podcast. It's going to be so fun.
June 7th in New York, and then July 20th in Atlanta, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been way too long. Let's do it again real soon.
Oh, my God. Real soon, friend. Thank you.